Is it possible that the grey squidgy stuff that lives up inside this little dome here is better than AI at tuning a drone? Is ChatGPT better than manus.im? Well, today we're going to find out, because the dilapidated grey nonsense that lives inside this bald dome is going to be put to the test. That's right, we're putting manus.im versus ChatGPT versus Will It Mod. Who's going to come out on top? Let's find out. Will It Mod? Hello, you joined me after a micro mini marathon of tuning this drone. I've probably spent about an hour, I'd say, using my own squidgy grey stuff up here to process and calculate PIDs. Obviously I've used PIDToolbox as well, and that helps a lot. I've been following the PIDToolbox recommended workflow for BetaFlight 4.5, and I've kind of ended on a reasonably good tune, at least I hope so, after that time. I've gone back to the PID sliders, so I'm using RPY sliders, and what I've done is I've basically set my master multiplier until I was happy with jitter and overshoot. I then set my P&I gains. This is all done with stick response and dynamic damping at 0. I then set my offset from my roll to my pitch using pitch damping and pitch tracking, and then I've set my damping and stick response and dynamic damping afterwards to try and get those curves somewhere. I'm not going to tell you how I've done all that, because there are about a million videos on the internet of how to do that, and really it's down to your drone, your interpretation. What I'd recommend is going to the PIDToolbox channel and looking at the workflow, following that workflow as best you can for the best results. This is not the video of me showing you how to do this. I'm the last person you want to be showing you how to do this. So I have reached a point now where I've just erased the flash. I'm going to take it up for a final, hopefully final jiggle flight, and see some pretty good results, some pretty nice flat controlled lines. So let's take it up in the air. Still got this cough. Telemetry recovered. Let's get logging enabled, take it up in the air, give it a little jiggle flight, and then have a look at the logs. Right. That should do. Just plug it in. Don't catch your drone from mid-air flight. It's a silly thing to do. As some of you remember, I nearly sliced one of my fingers off 2 years ago, picking up an armed drone and hitting the this is why I've got pre-arm, by the way, on my TX16, for exactly that reason. I bent over to pick up a quad that had just landed. Well, I call it landing, it was more of a crash, as per my usual standard. And when I bent over, I clicked the arm switch, and it armed whilst I was picking it up and nearly sliced my finger off. That was funny. Right, Blackbox. Let's grab those logs, save them to, as you can see, I've been a busy boy this morning. Many logs. So here's all my logs. Let's grab that and then open the beautiful PIDToolbox. Okay, here we are. So we're looking at some of the results now in PIDToolbox, and I've got my last 3 flights in here. Just about to process the flights all together to have a look at which is our best line. And we can see here clearly on the top graph here for the roll response, 1.02 sinking down to 0.96 and then stabilizing out. The orange is the clear winner. And further down here we can also see that orange just peaks up, 1.01, sinks down, and that's beautiful. I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to look at the settings here. We've got I'm going to move this over to one side quickly. Go into my BetaFlight, got the drone plugged in, and we've got on the orange line 62, 110, 45, 37. 62, 110, 45, 37. That's cool. And then on the lower graph, 64, 115, 49, 40, 104. So that is the settings. That's the final tune that I've landed on. So we'll go back into those graphs and see why this is good. So this is some of my manual tuning, and we can go back actually and have a look at some of the earlier logs from when I first started doing the manual tuning. Gotta make sure I shut down that window. Open a very early file, and if we look at one of the big juicy ones from this morning, we are on the 2nd, so that's a fairly juicy one there. Let's go ahead and open that up. Like I said, I'm not going to teach you how to use PIDToolbox or how to PID tune, because I'm not going to take that responsibility, and I'm not brilliant at it. Like I said, there's way better folk out there better than this at this than me, for sure. Let's take all of the logs and have a look at them all. We can see some of the wildly different curves that I've been seeing. So we can see some undershoot up here on the red, so lower P gains, reasonable damping, higher P gains, and similar damping. We've got here good P gains and wildly terrible damping. So we've really refined this down to a point from this morning where I'm pretty happy with the curves. And what I'm looking at now is this. Not this, that would be terrible. Now looking at one of these, this one here, it looks great. Pitch seems to be a bit better. I think the reason for that, if we look at the drone, I think pitch is better because we have a battery pack on top which is wider that way. There's more mass towards the outer edge on roll than there is on pitch. On pitch, the battery is rolling around a central axis where there's less mass at the edges, whereas on roll we're doing it this way. Somebody described this battery configuration as toilet tank. Seems about right. And that's why I'm seeing a slower roll response. We're having to put in more P gains on the roll response to get over that that larger amount of mass, and then there's more damping to correct because of the inertia difference as well in that moving mass. And that's where I'm at. Alright, let's unplug that and then we'll take it out for a flight and talk about some of the differences. Goggles. Find out radio. Logging's turned off. Let's just go. Straight into a roll, no flyaways, which is good stuff. I did take this out with the Manus tune, and I found that it did a massive flyaway, which was pretty bad. I had to kill the drone mid-air, put it in angle mode, and then try and recover it back, which was pants. Flying nice. There is a bit more prop wash than on one of the ChatGPT tunes, but then that would probably be due to the amount of damping. Hugely dampened settings are going to get rid of an amount of oscillations and prop wash, but it's also going to reduce the agility in the tune. There, it stuck itself to the wall. Where are we? We're okay. Props are okay. Sounds right. It's me trying to talk and do stuff at the same time. Okay, you can probably see my head bobbling around as well. You can tell I've been out the FPV game for a while. Sign of a noob. The head shuffle around. Because the wife's parked the landy in a different place. That's what I'm going to blame crashing on the wall on. Wasn't my fault at all. We have to go down the other side of it, can we? Yeah, look at that. well. Still doing alright. Not the most awake I've been this week, so I'm not going to be able to little tap there. Not going to be able to do mad tricks. Bit of a shimmy. And again, you're watching unstabilized footage through this as well, so it'll give you an idea as to what's going on. Genuinely going on. Right, 3.6 watts. Let's bring it in now anyway. I think I've learned what I need to learn from this flight. There. Oh yeah, press all. There you go. See, pressing all the buttons when I bend over to do everything. That's exactly why I've got pre-arm on my controller now to stop my fingers from being chopped off. Right, what can I tell you about the flights? Okay, flight-wise. What have we got going on? I enjoyed that flight. It's perfectly good. I'm not particularly wide awake this morning, and I'm not going to be able to sometimes you're in a really good mood to do acro, sometimes you're not. But what I can tell you is about the flight and the responsiveness of the sticks, and really, the feel overall. So let me get on to that. The settings I've got here. I'm going to plug this back in. The settings I have here for the PID tuning, these have all come out of my head. Like I said, let's save this preset and we can maybe have a look at some of the differences, and we could talk about some of the differences as well. My brain tune. And the differences are fairly stark, let's be honest. And I think I can explain some of the differences better using the PID toolbox. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So we've got, let's do a reset on that. Let's pull out that data. Let's go back into the main. We're going to reset that as well. Clear all the loaded logs. Yes. Okay, let's go for a dark theme again. Now if I pull out my manual tune and we'll go for, I believe it was in here. Have a look at the tunes within here. Go for the second one, and this is the one that I was happy with and ultimately used. So again, looking at the step response tool, let's run that step response. Yep, so there's the graph. That's what we're using. These are the settings that we're using. Come out of that and I'll open another file and I will go into the Manus Blackbox Logs. I will open those. And I'll take the latest one of those, which is the most recent flight, so we can compare the data. Must be quite a large log. There we go. So we'll take this one here, 1 minute 31. That is pretty sizable. We'll take the 50 because that's we'll take the last one I did because that's the settings I would have used. That is a long jiggle flight. Yeah, and it's separated out, so that's fine. We can look at that. We'll also open up... In fact, no, before we open up the ChatGPT, let's just look at the step response in between these two. We'll select them both and have a look. So here you can see the difference between the highly over-dampened and slightly undershot p-value from the Manus tune, and then generally a good amount of control afterwards. I would say it's probably more damped. There's less rippling going on, but only to a slight degree. What I think on this is we get up to a reasonable set point here after 55-ish milliseconds. We're on point. It's up to this point, leading up to this point is what's making the difference on the roll response. On the Manus tune, which is in orange, we can see an undershoot, over damping, and then a correction, and then into stable. On the brain tune, the grey matter tune, we can see a much sharper response on the initial power input, a very slight correction, and then back into a stable control afterwards. And the story here is the same for the pitch response. Pitch response is really slow on Manus. If we look at when these converge, we're looking about the same, 10, 20, 30, 60-ish milliseconds there, and they're converging. Manus shows a very slow, so undershooting P and over dampened into the point where we want it to be, whereas the grey matter tune using good old traditional brains has come up a lot sharper. There is a very small correction, and then we're on the line. So we are I would say 20 to 30 milliseconds on the line, 20 to 30 milliseconds earlier. And although that doesn't sound like a lot, it is. The only reason why on this roll response I'm not too fussed about the over and undershoot is because they're fairly similar. So the overshoot is almost compensated by the undershoot. But you know, when we look at the values, we're looking here at 5%, or even, not even that, 4.5% undershoot there if we're taking one as 100%, and then a 2% overshoot. So really a very small margin. And how does that compare with the ChatGPT? And I haven't compared these, but I'm going to have a look at them, because I suspect the ChatGPT tune is probably even more dampened than what we're seeing here. That's from 7:19 p.m. Okay, so that will be the one. Yep, that looks like a Jiggle flight to me, and that's the latest one. So back into the step response tool, we'll open up all three so you can see what's going on here. And this is what we've got. Yeah, it's exactly that, isn't it? Look. Yellow being the ChatGPT tune, hugely undershot on the P. It's over dampened, struggles to get up to the line, and then kind of fights itself. So as iTerm is building up, it's starting to behave a bit better. But yeah, bad. But weirdly, this flew better than the Manus tune. The Manus tune was a bit more edgy, but it didn't feel in control. And this is probably where the feed-forward balance and everything else comes into effect. And this is where I lose out. This is where my brain goes, yeah, I don't know any more than that. And for that, this is where we need someone like Brian to explain exactly what's happening and what's going on. On this low one here, again, we can see the ChatGPT tune undershooting, overdamping, and then doing all sorts of weird stuff. I can only presume this is some kind of build-up in the iTerm that's forcing it back up here. But again, a very unpredictable and strange wobbly shape in to the control here for the pitch response. Brain tune in red, of course, straight up, minor correction. And this is where we're seeing the differences. The converging point on all of these, if we look even at this this last tune, they converge at this kind of a point. So they're all around about here. And that is 80 milliseconds. And if we look how slow that is up into where it should be, you know, we're looking at 80 milliseconds. That's a long time to get there. And that's a massive perceivable difference from what is effectively, about 10 milliseconds here on pitch response for the brain tune. No, 20, 25, 22 and a half-ish. So the difference between 20 milliseconds and 80 milliseconds doesn't sound like a lot, but actually it's a huge amount. If you've ever watched a movie where the voice is out of sync with the picture slightly, anything over 50 milliseconds you're going to notice. For some AV enthusiasts, you might find 35, 20 milliseconds is actually perceivable to them. I know it is to me, and I dial in those settings to try and get things right. And that's important when you're flying FPV, because of course if you're expecting it to be at a set point as you're commanding it and there's a bit of latency, you're going to have a less sharp flight. It's not going to be where you expect it to be, and then you're going to have to learn the latency and fly that drone in that kind of latency mode, if you like. It's not just the latency of that PID and getting to the control point either. It's the combined latency of that with the latency on the goggles, on the digital system, with the latency of everything combined. Stack all of those latencies up together end to end, and you end up with an overall latency that's compounded. And that's potentially a problem, especially when you're heading up from 25 milliseconds to 80. Why is this an interesting point? Well, I found when I flew the ChatGPT tune, the second version of it, I felt really comfortable with it. In fact, it was doing what I wanted it to. I felt comfortable, it felt stable. There was hardly any prop wash unless you really tried to eke it out. And I love that tune. It filled me with confidence. And that's funny because it wasn't, according to PIDToolbox, a perfect PID curve. Far from it. In fact, as you could see, it was undershooting and then very restricted, dampened, coming back up onto the control line. And yet to me, it felt really good. It felt sharp and responsive. The brain tune, the grey matter tune from this bold dome over here, it was technically on the money way sooner, and it felt sharper, but because I'm not used to it at this point, it felt I wasn't 100% comfortable with it, and that's where my skills run out. If you have a professional FPV freestyler who's absolutely gunning it, they want the sharpest latency, the quickest response, the most money on the line. They want a raw feel. And for me, not being that professional, I'm an amateur at best. As I said, my flying is probably intermediate and I love to crash. So for me, perhaps having that extra damping coming up onto point helps my flying. But again, it's all subjective. It's all what you prefer. That's the whole point about FPV. If you want to tune it using GPT and it works for you, fill your boots. If you want to use Manus and that works for you, fill your boots. If you want to do it yourself and spend hours, like I've done over the years with some of these, then do it that way. It's whatever you prefer to do, whatever works for you. If it catches fire or flies away, does a run off, like I mentioned with the Manus tune, wow, that's a point worth exploring. I think you get to a point with Manus where it just confuses itself, and although it's very clever because it unpacks the data, it unpacks the Blackbox logs, and it transforms that data into graphs using Python. I don't think they're particularly accurate. In fact, that's been echoed as well by an expert, an absolute expert in the area, and he said the same thing. The graphs seem to be way off, and the more you push Manus to refine the tune, the worse it gets. Like I said, I had a flight yesterday, and I did another Manus tune, like V3, and I did one roll and stabilised and stopped, and the thing just shot up in the air. Zero throttle, the thing's oscillating, fluttering and flying upwards. It was up and up and up. I had to kill the motor, flick it into horizon mode, pre-arm it and arm it, get it to catch itself, and then basically do the same because it started going up. I had to do that 2 or 3 times till I got it a metre off the ground, and then eventually, crashed it. It's as simple as that. Doing the thing that I do best. And this is where it goes wrong, around about here. I'm off the throttle, it's doing its own thing, I'm trying to guide it back home, it flips around on its head, and I'm into stabilised mode, back into acro, stabilised, acro, just trying to gain some kind of control, and eventually I gain it back and fly it towards the ground. So that was a tune that got progressively worse, and I've seen similar people see similar things with ChatGPT as well. They're very good at getting to a set point. It's almost like they have a preset that they're applying from their large language model, and they don't fully understand the data. It's not to say they don't understand PIDs, because PID tuning and AI go together in the electromechanical world, and they've been using AI a lot recently to tune PIDs in mechanical interfaces. So it's not necessarily the PID understanding that's missing. I think it's just the overall architecture and the inability to effectively take the Blackbox logs and turn them into usable graphs, usable data, specifically for FPV. So the thing is here, we're close to having AI do this all for you, but the reality is it's not quite there yet. It will be, and it will be very soon, I think. It's very, very promising, but we're not there quite yet. However, if you're looking for a quick fix, as I said before, if you want a quick tune and a preset and a quick refinement, that saved me a lot of time. I still think the Manus tune was okay. It felt better at the time, probably because it was more edgy. The reality was, I think after going back and flying the GPT tune, that felt the most stable, the most comfortable. And the reality about the brain tune here on this little beast is that is the quickest response. That's the quickest PID response into the set point. And I'm going to fly that and get used to that, and try and reteach my brain how to fly this with the correct tune on it. And that's the point. Learning to fly a drone with a useless set of PID settings and tune isn't necessarily going to make you be able to fly a properly tuned drone better. I think it's about familiarity in what you're flying, and that's something that I've got to try and prove. Anyway, that's kind of where I feel about it, what I feel about it and how I think things are going. It's been really fun making this little mini series about all of the tuning and stuff. If there's anything else you want me to deep dive into, please let me know in the comments below. If you've tuned anything yourself and had issues, again, let me know how it went with you. I know a couple of people have already said that they've had some issues. The further they've pushed into ChatGPT, the worse the tune's got, and that's absolutely it. But I found it fun, and that's the whole point of doing this. FPV is subjective. It's what's right for you, not anybody else. Don't let anyone else say, oh, you can't use AI to do, or you shouldn't, or you should be doing it. Who cares? No one cares other than you. If you want to do it, fill your boots, like I said. If you want to do it manually, then do that. Me personally, I'll probably use a blend of various things moving forwards, and I will continue to try to use AI specifically for this reason, because I'm intrigued to see where this is going, because this has some legs. And that's the end of it. Anyway, if you've made it to the end, thank you very much for watching. Bunch of new subscribers, so if you've subscribed recently, over 450 of you in the last week, really appreciate it. Welcome aboard. I'm sure this should be quite a fun journey, and it's going to be powered by you guys. So let me know what you want to see next. I'll try and carry on working on some other reasonably awesome ideas that I've got going on up in said squidgy stuff. But that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't seen part 1, I will put a link here. That's the ChatGPT tune. If you haven't seen part 2, that's the Manus tune. That's over there. If you haven't seen the hybrid tune, which is where I take ChatGPT and apply graphs into it, that'll be down here. And then I'll smash a subscribe thing down there. Feel free, browse, have a watch, enjoy, be awesome, and that's about it for now. See you soon.